Here. So moved.
For this
Second.
recording this, so use your
Okay,
microphone, please.
so Mr. Teat first, second by Mr. Kopek, thank you. Discussion?
As I read through the minutes, I just want to, obviously, there's a few spelling errors in there, I think, with names, so you'll just make mention of that, and that's about all I have.
Same, yeah, that's all I had was page 3, spelling of certain individuals' names, so
Okay.
that would be paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. GRA versus GAR, GRA versus GAR.
Yeah, all
All
right.
right. So, any other further discussion on the minutes? If none,
Only other typo, maybe on page 3, in the 5th paragraph, it should be, I'm assuming, served instead of severed. Fire district served Campton Hills.
which paragraph? Okay.
Just minor, but
Severed, yes. Okay, I got it. Jim, did you get that?
No, I didn't. What
Okay,
page?
yeah, so page 3 again. Just count down, how about the 5th paragraph? Second line.
Uh-huh.
Severed
Served,
Campton
yeah.
Hills versus served?
Yeah, served.
Yeah,
Well, it's an actual word, so it doesn't show up.
Right, right.
That's the trouble.
okay. All right, any other further comments? If none, can I have a motion to approve with the amendment of the corrections?
so moved.
A motion, Mr. Teat.
Second.
Second, Mr. Kopek. All those, voice vote, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carries. Minutes are approved.
Right. I'd also like to note, Mr. Johnson arrived.
Thank you. Thank you.
Liaison.
Yes. Okay, item number 4, public comment. I didn't receive any sheets, and no public comments today. All right, very good. All right, item number 5, review and discuss the draft article introduced at a previous meeting of the Zoning Commission, Article 8, Development Standards minus the animal provisions. I know we're doing a lot of things with Article 8. And one of the things, besides going through Article 8 in a line-by-line format, is at the last meeting, we wanted to reorganize Article 8. So you'll notice the first part is kind of more of a clean draft that's been reorganized. And then subsequently in there is the line-by-line of Article 8 as well, all right? So what I did is I went through Article 8, and we're going to go back, basically go to the top of Article 8 and go through it again. However, the areas that we have covered, like ham radios, book exchange, carport TVs, the things we already have looked at, I've annotated, and we'll pass through those unless you have further comments. And then the other ones we have not covered yet. So they're kind of, since it was reorganized, they're mixed and sprinkled in between, so it's hard to go like line by each section. Does that make sense? Just kind of want to make sure everybody's up to snuff of what we're doing and how we're going to do it, so, okay? But if you're confused or have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, and we'll try to get it clarified as best as possible for you. Okay, so pressing on to, which is going to be, I guess you have a memorandum here from staff. Jim, did you want to add anything else before I know nonconformities, I'll come back to you. Did you have
No.
anything else to add on Article 8 before you could progress? Okay.
No.
All right. Very good. So overall, page number 11, which is one of 16, which is accessory use and structures, Article 8. This is the reorganized section. All right, so I'm just going to go through the pages, and I'll note if I have any corrections or things, and if you have any, please bring them up. So page 1 of 16, which is 8.1, general requirements. I have no annotations or corrections on that. So is everybody caught up to where we are and where we're going through? Okay?
Yeah.
All right. So I have nothing on 1.
I had one quick
Okay,
comment on
sure.
one. As it relates to applicability of required setbacks, it talks about the ordinance. Do we want, or would it be appropriate to put something in there that references the, like, my thought is at the bottom, you say, permitted by this ordinance, or variance is approved, comma, or as permitted in a previously approved PUD? Because sometimes the PUDs, the setbacks may be different.
Just wondering, I see your point. But the PUD is always going to be controlling, right? So I'm just,
Yeah.
but
I just
get it.
didn't know if
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, we
appropriate
can
or
do that.
not.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I will note, I was talking to Rolf prior to the meeting, and this Article 8 has been reorganized, and the next couple chapters you'll see are going to be reorganized as well. And I think at least paragraph B and C here, and maybe this entire A through D gets shoved to a different chapter, but we can review it now, so I'll note that, yeah. Yeah, so we can add PUD in there as well, plan unit development as well. Yeah.
And then I just had one other comment with respects to item D. It talks about the site triangles and not allowing the mailboxes in there. I don't know, I mean, typically the site triangles are 25 feet back from the corners. I don't know if the village wants to just eliminate that from being in there in general, because I guess the U.S. Postmaster has certain requirements of heights that the mailbox has to be in. If we're going to allow a mailbox in that area, it's kind of hard to comply with two things. You're going to have the postmaster height requirement, and you're also going to have the site triangle height requirement. And so you're kind of got conflicting items.
Will you put something in that this would be the requirement unless superseded by postal
Potentially,
regulations?
yeah, I was just, from past experience, I
Yeah,
know some
no,
people will read
appreciate
the
it.
letter of the law, and if you say you can't put your mailbox there because of this, then they'll go, well, the postmaster says I can because of this. And so I just don't know if, I was trying to think of any situations where a mailbox may even need to be required in that 25 feet. Because typically your lots are 50-foot wide, and offhand, I don't remember if there's a minimum, like maybe in 40 feet, but even if it is 40 feet, that mailbox could still be outside the 25. So my thought is maybe somehow we don't even allow mailboxes in that site triangle. Unless there's some instance that I'm missing that, there's always something, but.
I mean, you always get a variance, right, for something like that? I mean, it's on another
We
subject.
just hope they'd be able to move them.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if it really came to a unique situation, you're saying, hey, it's not allowed. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, if somebody comes to you and says it's not allowed,
Yeah.
but I can't, what else am I gonna do? And like, oh, okay, well, there is no option here, so I would say maybe maybe your idea would be, don't allow it.
Right.
And then if there is a unique situation, then they can always seek a variance.
Yeah. Yep, okay.
So do you want to just delete that, section D?
I don't know if we have to delete it, because I think the site triangle is important. I think if anything, maybe somehow you say, all structures including, signs, and just remove mailboxes, privacy fence or wall are limited to a maximum height of 30 within site triangle, and maybe you just, the last sentence, you just put mailboxes are not allowed in the site triangle area or something.
Okay.
So I just remove it in the first line and then put that sentence in the
Yeah.
back? Yeah, I like that. All right, good suggestion.
Okay.
Okay, next page, and I'm just moving along, but you don't hesitate to stop me, all right? So, next page is 8.2, accessory structures and uses. This is one we have not, this is a new one, so this is not something we had reviewed before. Just a quick question for Mr. Brown. The definition there in the kind of the tan or colored box, is that planning on remaining throughout the document in the final document, or is that just here for our edification?
I would intend to use this
Okay.
unless there's corrections or
No,
objections to it. That's pretty standard
Yeah,
definition.
that's fine.
for
I just,
accessory
just a different
uses.
format and everything, so
Yeah,
I'm-
yeah.
I'm fine with it. I was just
Yeah.
questioning if that was just something for us as a
Yeah,
review.
Mr. Kopak raised the issue last
Right.
time, the lack
Yeah,
of
no,
definitions. And
right.
I'd had a separate sheet, and I thought, well, why don't I just insert it where it comes up and make it easy for
I like it,
readers?
I like it,
Yeah.
so I just want to get the clarification on that.
I just had one question with the definition of accessory structure. As I read it, it says it refers to, with the single exception of any accessory off-street parking facility, I guess. And my question is can a garage be considered as an off-street parking facility? Meaning like, if somebody wanted to build a two-car garage that's detached, can that be considered? Or, I looked up, I tried to find some definitions in existing code, and I didn't really find a definition for either, and I just didn't know if that's something that, I hate to leave some room for interpretation, but sometimes when you do, then it, hey, this is an off-street parking facility, it's a garage. So
Yeah,
I just,
let me read this here again. The single? Yeah, I think that's referring to, I'm not even sure it's in our code, if someone wanted to build a parking garage, and that was the primary use, is what that's referring to.
sure, and like I said, I agree, I just didn't know, because I didn't see like a definition for an off-street parking facility anywhere either, so I don't know if maybe it's worth adding a definition of that,
We can.
excluding garages
Yeah.
or something, I don't know, I'm not
Or
trying to be
residential
nitpicky.
garages or.
No,
trying to
no.
help your life down the road.
Sure, sometimes you have to go to two or three there's a word in the definition you gotta check on, so this is a case where that would be, so, yeah. We'll define the off-street parking facility.
Yeah, so not to include it, basically a garage for a home.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. All right. What else? Anything else on page 2 of 16, which is under 8.2A? I guess I'll just wait for the tables to go to those later. They're there. I know they're mentioned here, but they're further down, so I'm just going to wait.
Yeah, they were
That's fine.
Excel documents. and
Yeah, no,
I
that's
could have
fine.
inserted
No,
them
that's not a
here.
criticism. I'm
I
just gonna
could
wait
have inserted them
just to address those that, when we get further down there. And I did not have any comments on there.
I did have one other question, sorry.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah,
hitting
no.
it hard in the beginning. Under number 5, where it talks about no accessory structures permitted to be located in a utility drainage or access easement, I guess my question is a fence is considered an accessory structure? And later on, I didn't necessarily see if I couldn't quite tell if fences are allowed in a drainage easement or not, or utility easement, because I feel they should be allowed. When it's come to drainage, you have a 4-inch
Yeah.
clearance or things like that, because the fence panel can be easily removed, and it would be, from a permit aspect, you have it where the homeowner is responsible for removing if, utility easement, but I just didn't know if, I couldn't quite find when I was looking through to make the determination if it said ultimately fences were allowed, or if number 5, what basically says it
I
wouldn't
thought
be
in the
because it's.
fence section, go ahead, Carmen.
There's
In the fence section, I thought
some
there was.
reference to it in 8.4A7. Fences or walls shall not interfere with drainage easements or impede the natural flow of water on or across lots. So it doesn't specifically say they shall not be allowed inside of drainage easements, but it does say they shall not interfere.
Yeah, it kind of infers
Which
that
implies,
it's
which
allowed.
implies that they're
For
allowed.
drainage though, but not
Not
utility easement.
utility though, yeah.
And I'm thinking, some yards, people may have a natural gas easement in their backyard or something, and it's 30
Yeah.
feet, and their backyard is this far from the house, then they can't put a fence. So I don't know, that's why I asked the
No,
question,
no, we
because
could just,
this is
just say
something
with the
down the
exception-
road I
with-
know
sure,
will
with the
come into
exception of
play,
fences.
especially with
The
fences,
exception of fences,
so, okay.
just add, with the exception of fences.
Okay. All right, good point. There's nothing further on page 2 of 16. Under location, we'll go, with the exception of the two tables, which we'll get to
Yeah,
later. Next, page 3 is accessory dwelling units, 8.3. So a couple of things before we get going. We had one conversation last week, or last meeting, I should say. And I think part of it was how far down the rabbit hole do we want to go? And was there, I think we left it, was potentially some discussions going to be made with staff about whether they want attached or detached, or how we want it to, did you have a chance to have that conversation?
Yeah, I would say the kind of general leaning was away from detached.
Okay, and I think that's, after some time of reflection from the last meeting, when I thought more about it, I think the detached ones really do present a lot of challenges and
They
obstacles.
do, and I thought of that too.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of.
I would be comfortable with, I think it currently has attached, and I think
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with attached dwelling units, but personally, right now, at this point, I'm uncomfortable with the detached. That's my own personal opinion. I'm not trying to persuade anybody, but, because the conversation was like, hell, if we're gonna to go down the path of attached, then we need to start, fixing the ordinance for it. But if we're not gonna do
Right.
detached, then why even spend any time on it? So,
Right.
so I guess I'm just trying to figure out what's the purview of the other committee members or commissioners, if they have a preference or non-preference about attached, to include attached dwelling units, accessory dwelling units, detached, either, or none. Is there any consensus?
My inclination is that we recognize detached units, but they should always be a special use or an exception rather than trying to, define it. Because most lots, you're not gonna have enough room for a detached unit. And on the handful of lots, handful is probably, maybe 200 lots or so that could use it. On those instances, it should come up as, I think as a special use.
The only issue with that is that you'd have to delineate the dimensions and
Right.
the requirements for a detached,
Right, but instead
ADU.
of blanket, not approval, but acceptance of a detached ADU, we make it that it has to go through a special use permit.
I mean, it's certainly, if that's the desire of the commission, that can be added in there. Yeah, I wouldn't put it in there without specifying what the dimensional requirements are, just the individual requirements for that type of structure are.
Yeah.
Right now, you have it set up that if it's a permitted use on, attached is permitted, correct?
The current ordinance, the 2023 ordinance has attached as a allowable
Well, yeah.
dwelling unit. And detached is not. And when this initially was brought up, seemed like several people, including some public comment, was in favor of considering the detached. So I added that with just some basic parameters, which I think there should be, because that accessory unit is really, by definition, they're supposed to be, secondary to the main residence in size and in function, So I added some dimensional requirements that were found in some other codes, and now it seems like we've kind of swung back away from it. So I did break this out, and I'm not a voting member, I have no preference. But I do think that just the detached raises, I just see some enforcement issues down the road, and them being turned into just rental units, which is really not our intention.
Chris, do you have any comments on it? A position or a thought?
I guess I did not make the last meeting to to hear the discussion. I read the minutes. What was written regarding detached and attached ADUs, I thought was well-written. My only comment that I had was just if there's a loophole in there with respects to the R and F zoning, like if there's some type of loophole where if you're, zoned RF, I think you could then maybe have a ADU above the garage or something. So, but aside from that, I guess, not hearing the discussion last time, I don't have an issue personally with having a detached ADU. I agree, there's probably are some enforcement issues as far as, is it a renter, is it not? I mean, even an attached
Right.
ADU, you have the same issue, I think.
could.
But, I guess I see there is some need and or want where somebody may have build a larger garage or a detached garage and want, a small apartment above it for their kid who's coming home from college or something. So I see that potentially being a need. Not every home, somebody may not want to necessarily put an addition onto their house either, or can't, where maybe they could put a detached garage within, a certain distance from their home. So, I could go either way, but I suppose if it's under the purview that we only, right now, go with attached, and that's what's approved down the road, certainly it could come back, and you could revise the zoning ordinance too, if all of a sudden there's a large outcry and there's a need for it. So, you could baby step it that way too, potentially.
Terry, any thoughts?
I almost have the same thoughts as you, where, I was one of the ones for the detached units. I feel like if we're trying to kind of stay back away from the detached, at least maybe, again, allow the garage unit, that would maybe be a compromise. Instead of an entirely separate structure, at least it would have two uses for, the facility, versus like eliminating it completely. That might be kind of a compromise.
I believe somewhere else there is something about, in the current ordinance, there's something about using space above a garage, but it can't have a refrigerator or something like that. There's
Yeah.
verbiage in there. So that would, not that it can't be changed, but that's kind of the way it's currently written. So that's my understanding, is like you can use it for like a den or a workout room, but you just couldn't have like more of the kitchen type appliances up there. But if that's what we want to say, hey, I'm willing to entertain that. So, Jim?
Well, you're saying, though, that an ADU as part of a garage would be a fully functional unit, as opposed to having a semi-living space or
Like a workshop.
exercise room or something.
Office.
Yeah.
With plumbing, that's what you're trying to avoid.
Well, I'm just saying that's what the current regulations or the ordinance is
Yeah.
currently, is basically you can have a living space above a garage, but
Right.
I think it says you can't have a refrigerator or
Yeah.
It
something
says
like
it
that.
cannot, may not contain a kitchen, but may contain an office or recreation room.
So it can't have a kitchen, yeah.
Right.
Right.
So
Right.
that's what it currently is, so,
Right, so, but if it's classified as an ADU, it would have.
Oh, exactly, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
this wouldn't make any sense.
That would be the compromise,
Yes.
to not allow a detached, just standalone ADU, is to at least allow an ADU above an existing structure such as a garage.
would it have to be
Okay.
existing, or would you say, what if they want to build a garage with an ADU on top of it? So then you'd be okay with
Yeah.
saying, I'm just
Yeah.
checking when you said existing.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Would that be something then we would agree on, then to say that if we do, the only type of detached would be above like a garage, or, I don't know the best way to put that, is maybe it is a garage, or could it be, I don't know if it could be a pole barn?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to necessarily be a garage, it could be a pole barn.
Yeah.
Like a
And-
multi-use structure,
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah, so, rather than just a standalone, I guess you have to look at it that way. Someone says, well, I don't want a pole barn, I don't want a garage, I just want the accessory unit, so.
So then I called out my little yellow box. It does provide a loophole. If someone wants the detached ADU, they just they have a garage along with it.
Which, maybe they'll need one, so, I don't know. All right, so I guess the feeling I'm getting is that we're all good on the attached.
Yes.
And then, rather than doing a wide encompassing detached, that perhaps we settle for above a, I don't know the best way to put that, either above a garage or structure that,
Or accessory building,
accessory building.
garage or accessory building, or,
Well, then you're right back to
Yeah.
detached.
Then
That's
we're,
just-
then, yeah, so do we then?
It's
just
almost
keep it?
like all or.
Yeah, it is. It's almost,
It
it's either
is.
you keep it or you don't.
Yeah.
Is there a big demand right now in the village for accessory dwelling units? Okay.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
But if it's already excluded in the ordinance, maybe that's why they don't feel like they can get it passed, so why bother? I mean, I don't know. If, if they're already looking through and go, oh, these aren't allowed, maybe it just stops right there. I mean, is there really a way to gauge that?
We've, through the years with zoning.
your mic, please?
Oh, yeah.
Through the years with the zoning board and all, we've not had, the only inquiries we've had is usually like, we want to add a kitchen to our basement. And sometimes those were very large houses to start with. So that's about the closest I recall anything coming up for something like that. I think some of it, the dilemma is always, are we planning or are we zoning? And all. And for example, some of our planned communities here were designed to be walking communities, and yet that's not really the case. Everybody's driving their cars still to go wherever and all. So sometimes intentions don't necessarily,
Right.
meet what sort of reality is and all too. And I always wondered too is, I could see having additional space within a existing home, because then you don't really notice it, and from a tax-paying standpoint, you're probably gonna get hit harder if you have an accessory dwelling that's detached. So the desirability of the lot may be somewhat of question too. So there's all sorts of different ramifications besides from purely head counting, is this part of our parameter of family definition and all that, which is the challenge.
Well, and again, we're zoning towards the future, and it seems like multi-generational family living is trending now. You know what I mean? Like, people are starting to live with their children and their parents more now than maybe they have in the past, so maybe that's why it hasn't become an issue. But if we're zoning for future, I feel like, this might be something that's going to come up more and more.
Well,
The counter to that is, though, everybody loves their single-family home to be protected, and if it gets watered down by a detached, and then there's a rental unit, or even if it's children coming back with 4 more cars, the neighbor looking at those extra cars in the driveway or out on the street, that becomes the other issue that you have to worry about. So when it's attached, you kind of limit a little bit. Because the bigger you open that door, I know from past experience, it just creates the neighbors arguing that you've devalued my property because now I got a duplex instead of a single family next to me. And it's hard to enforce because you get into that definition of family and how connected are they as family.
all right, so we've got a couple of options. One is that I think it is, in my opinion, all or nothing. So
Yeah.
I either think we dive in and say, you know what, here's what we recommend to the village board, and if they don't like it, they can cut it out. I guess my personal opinion is I would lean towards just attached, not have the detached, but I'm willing to go with it, because it seems more people are able to, or acceptable to both, so.
So then we would drop section C? Is that what you're suggesting? The detached ADUs?
I guess that's my personal preference, but like I said, it's either all or nothing, or so we just say both. accessory and, I'm sorry, detached and not detached. So,
So ADUs above garages would still be an option.
what, that would be,
That was part of the all or nothing.
yeah, that was probably the only thing, so, no.
You have detached under C, and then you have ADUs above garages as a whole nother
Right,
section.
I broke that out, just in
Yeah.
case we did want to have.
Yeah.
But
Right.
item D, it says an ADU above a detached garage.
Right,
It doesn't say attached.
Right.
Right,
right.
So if we're getting rid of detached C, I would think C and D need to come out.
yeah.
Okay,
So I
I'll
said,
go with that.
That's if you're not allowing them.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. So, I mean, I guess it's not a I'm not a hard no. I'm just saying this is what my impression is, and that's what my gut feeling is right now, and just looking at it and thinking about the challenges ahead. There's a lot of good reasons, like you
Yeah.
say, in generational family, I get it, and there's also some negatives with it too. So how do you balance that out?
Okay.
I guess my gut says I would just go with attached, and could I just kind of just get people, would they say, yes, that's good, or would you say, no, I just prefer to have both? What do you think?
I'd be in favor of getting rid of then C and D and leave it for a future, generation to,
Yeah.
decide what's appropriate or what should be done if we get enough demand for it in the future.
Right. Yeah. What if we could, it sounds like, take it out now. We will have a public hearing on this. If
Right.
there's comment at the public hearing, sounds like we're pretty close to, we're kind of on the fence, but if there's public comment for it, then maybe we put it back in, and I don't want to seem like we're kicking it, the can up to the board, but that their decision is final anyway, so. But take it out for now, and then if there's public comment that is calling for it, we'll reconsider it.
I imagine there'll be discussion at the board level too, and since
Yeah.
you've prepared the language now, if you as a commission decide not to include it now, and the board would like to see it later, staff's already prepared it,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that's fine.
Okay, so for right now, our liaison would like to speak, yes. You're substituting for Mike, thank you.
Isn't it better to leave it all, and then if public speakers either say they're against it or they don't like it?
We could, yeah, either way, yeah.
It's easier to remove it.
It is.
Than to add it, at a later date. I mean, I think Carolyn and Chris made some really good points, you might have kids in college or a son in college or daughter who comes home and gets a job locally in St. Charles or Wayne or wherever it might be, or the village commission house, and they want to live independently. And there is a detached garage on the property, and like children park their own garage, detached garage, and because they want to be home, but they want to live independently. That's just,
Okay, yeah.
you can always, like, Jim said, it can always be removed at a later date.
Yeah.
But it's up to the committee to choose.
I guess I just I'm staying where I'm at, so that's my opinion. But if more members want to put it in, then that's it. So all or nothing.
I know.
I guess I think if we leave it in, at least there's language then that the board can evaluate. If we remove it, there is no language that the board can evaluate when they discuss it too.
And for public.
For the
You know,
public
If
hearing.
they don't have it to see, how are they going to make a comment on it if it doesn't exist?
So, sorry, I vote,
Jim?
my
All right.
vote is we leave
No,
it
it's
in.
Okay, no, that's what we're looking
All right.
for. That's what we're looking for. Terry, you want to leave it in? Jim?
Well, leave it in.
Okay,
we'll leave it
there we
in.
go.
Yeah,
So we'll leave it in, all right?
we'll leave it in. Yeah,
Wow.
see what
that's
happens.
Great
Okay.
democracy there.
All right.
All right, okay, so we're going to leave it in. I guess so then if we are going to leave it in, let's start talking about it then, right? So let's see, staff comments, just reading the top of 8.3, which is page 3 of 16, accessory dwelling units. Note that the location of ADU has been amended, no longer, okay, okay, we just added that there's only one ADU per zoning, that was, we added that,
Yeah.
we added that in the last one. On B2B, attached DUs, it says the ADU and existing primary dwelling units share a wall at least 20 feet in length.
Yeah, I put that in just because I don't want any situation, people always try and circumvent by connecting something with a breezeway and essentially they have a detached structure. That's all that was put in. I mean,
And that's under
most-
attached, so
Yeah,
I see that.
so,
And if there, for some reason, someone wanted to get like, my
But if we're-
existing is 15 feet, and I just
Yeah.
want to extend that 15-foot wide thing, they could do that with the variance, right?
right, but if we're allowing detached, then that doesn't
Yeah.
really matter.
Yeah.
So much, but.
Okay, all right, okay, all right.
But I'll leave it in for now, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
really,
yeah, leave it
if
in.
they're going to add on, it probably should have that.
Then we have, next page, unless there's something else on that page, so page 4, item Delta, which is ADUs above garages. So it says, does the commission desire to keep the provision for ADUs above garages? So for all in.
And that will be attached garages. Sometimes I try and be cognizant of this, sometimes those black titles, the paragraph titles, which are just for reference, aren't fully explanatory. I should add detached, the title should be ADUs above detached garages. That's
Okay.
what the text says, so I'll correct that.
Which we're saying we can do that, all right, so with the all-in, with the all-in thing, all right? Okay, anything else on that? If not, we'll move to 8.4, fences and walls, which I believe we have already covered. This is one of the things that got reordered, and we already went over that one in a previous, not that we can't add anything or change anything on it, but we have looked at this as a previous
Yeah, the
meeting.
only thing I would go over, this is pretty much the same as the 2023 ordinance, with the exception of paragraph B on page 5, exempt fences. That was not in there. I thought we should exempt some of these types of fences from the requirements. We do the same for signs, too. You're going to see that. So if you can just read that and ensure you're all okay with
So there's, like, yeah, fences that are exempt regarding drainage and the flow of water in paragraph, okay. Except for that, okay. Okay, I have no problem.
Okay, I'm just not clear on the prohibited materials. If it's existing, it would be grandfathered in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And under exempt fences, number 4, it says notwithstanding the provisions on prohibited materials, temporary fences used during construction activities. Okay, so they're exempt, but they can't use prohibited materials.
Right, they can't put up barbed wire. So if you have a
Right.
construction site, you're going to put up some other type of security fence other than string and
Or electrical.
razor wire,
Yeah,
barbed
yeah,
wire, or
or
something like that.
Okay, it's clear.
I had a question about the chain link being prohibited, because they do make coated chain link that is actually very attractive for residential use. So why would that be prohibited?
A lot of communities do it. It was in our code. They don't like, chain link, particularly in residential areas.
I was going to suggest on that was maybe we allow chain link in the side and rear yard,
I've
And-
seen
and
that,
maybe
too.
not
I've seen
the-
that, too.
like on a corner lot,
Right.
I can't think of the secondary side yard, but, because a lot of times what I've seen happen is, two neighbors will put up fences and, and if one has a shadow fence or board on board and somebody else puts a chain link, I don't know, and I agree with what
Yeah.
you said. There are a good selection of vinyl coated or covered fencing, chain link that looks good, so.
Yeah.
I think some of it had to do with the fact that chain link has been associated more with cities and and all versus countryside, and we're trying to emphasize the rural aspect of the community, and so I think that's where that largely has come from through the years.
Yeah. I would imagine some HOAs have prohibitions on chain link as well.
Right, that too.
And I think that would be okay in instances, even in Campton Hills, where there are HOAs, and so if they don't want the chain link, that's their decision, and if somebody wants a chain link, that may be a decision, or, something they know going in, but if you have somebody who has a 20-acre parcel and they want to put a dog run in their backyard that's made out of chain link and they're surrounded by trees, we're now saying that they can't do that.
Or maybe the point is that you don't want chain link as perimeter fencing, but it would be permissible for, a dog run or,
Yeah.
something like that. But, so maybe differentiating perimeter fencing versus special use or, I don't know what you want to call it.
I've seen those types of exemptions for dog runs, kennels, things like that in
Yeah.
other codes, even in more urban areas too. It's
All right.
common exemption.
Okay. But back to the comment on whatever the industry term is, plastic-coated, vinyl-coated chain link is, you want to allow that?
You mean for a dog run?
No, for anything. Currently, there's a blanket prohibition on any type of chain link. So
Chain
we-
link period as perimeter fencing.
But
You-
what about the vinyl coated, like more attractive?
You don't
No.
like it? No?
Yeah,
No.
yeah, I'm a no.
No.
Understand what's the difference
Yeah.
between chain link, whether it's painted, whether it has vinyl, rubberized, whatever on the end.
It's just more attractive, like as an actual perimeter fence versus the steel or, the metallic looking industrial type chain link.
So if it's green, it's okay,
Well,
you're
that's
saying?
what I'm,
I-
that's the
that-
point I'm bringing
That's
up.
just as ugly as galvanized steel, I think.
Well, I mean, that's, a
Yeah.
matter of opinion, but.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is, but
it
that's,
is.
that's what we're here for. Yeah, I would not, I'm not a fan of the chain link being used. I mean, I could see it, like you said, maybe in the backyard or maybe, definitely for a kennel run or something like
Right.
that, some other use, but otherwise, I'm not a fan of that.
Okay, I'll add something on standalone dog run, kennel type thing. I mean, we allow the chicken one for the chicken.
Yeah, you could say like something, like, yeah, like
So, but it can't be part of the perimeter.
standalone
Can't-
things
Can't combine it with the
like
perimeter.
a dog run, like, yeah, and that, speaking of the chicken wire, just a paragraph above that, above B, exempt fences, where it's item 8, it's the same page.
Yeah.
888, it says chicken wire is prohibited, except for the use in farming, farming business zones as the use of closure of poultry or small animals. I think I made a comment before about if you have a garden, if you have a small garden or something, somebody wants to put chicken wire around
They
the
do, yeah,
garden.
uh-huh.
So that would,
I can add that, yeah.
that's basically a home garden or residential or something along those lines. You should allow that.
Well, then can you maybe mimic that with the chain link, except as used in F and FB zoning and as used for enclosures for,
Dog runs or,
Yeah,
or like,
mhm.
dog runs or like
yeah,
purposes.
yeah.
Okay?
There, okay, good. All right.
All right. That was page 5 of 16. Fences and anything else? Otherwise, I'm going to move to page 6.
Only other thing I might add on C1, we might want to just add language after the 52 inches and must also comply with site triangle requirements.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. yeah.
Yep. That's 5 of 16, C1. All right, you got that, Jim?
Yep.
All right. Next page. This is more of a question I have under D1. It says the height of 5 feet. It says in front of the corner side, a non-privacy fence is permitted up to a maximum height of 5 feet. I'm not really sure why, if it's a non-privacy fence, so like a split rail, I'm thinking, but that's a height of 5. Is there a reason for the 5 feet? I'm just curious. I'm just throwing.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, all right. I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I was just, I guess they don't want a 8-foot split rail fence
Yeah.
or something like that, so, okay.
Well, usually your stockade fences where you get the height of this wall that you see along
Yeah,
highways
okay. All right. Okay. Then, if nothing else on that, moving on to halfway down the page, home-based businesses, and that's all new, all right?
okay,
Uh,
going back to the
sure.
chain link.
Yeah, yeah,
If you
go for
read
it.
in D and E, it's permitted in both.
In F, yeah, in farming, yeah.
Yeah, so that's
In
almost.
farming, yeah.
Right, but that's what we were talking about for the top, is saying chain link except as used in F and B. So that is a little bit, it's,
Yeah, so it is accounted for.
Yeah.
I'll take a look at it.
Okay.
I'm sure, but I know what you want to get to. I think we may have it in D anyway, but I'll take a look.
Okay. 8.5 on page 6, that is new. So there's our definition of home-based businesses. Comments on the initial. Jim, do you have anything to add, just to start us off on this, or should you just read the comment?
No,
then?
again, just like the ADUs are secondary to the primary dwelling unit, the home-based business should be an accessory use or ancillary use to the residential use of the property.
Good.
That's the key point in allowing this.
I guess one general comment, I mean, I read through this, and I read through what the county's verbiage is for home-based businesses, and while I think this is a good attempt, I think we're starting to dive into the weeds just a little bit with some of this language, and I didn't bring it with me, but I kind of just like the county's verbiage and their approach to a home-based business, and I thought that was written a little better than, in my opinion, I think we just follow something like the county has, and maybe just remove this and cut and paste. And I didn't bring a copy with me, I was running
Okay.
out the door, but maybe, if we can quick take a read at what the county's zoning
Yeah.
verbiage is towards.
Yeah, I can.
It just seemed a little bit more broad, and not necessarily, I mean, I feel like some of these, and I know, like, when we talk about prohibited activities, it's not necessarily all encompassing, but, you start to, leaves a little room for interpretation, although a lot of things do, but I think, it hits some of the main points of noise and disruption of, noxious fumes or things like that, where, I mean, there may be some businesses that we haven't listed that create smoke or,
Yeah.
and others that don't. So I don't know, I like the way the county's ordinance took approached this, so that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, I think the whole noise issue, that was later wasn't there some provision in there, it just talked all about noise and odors and smells and everything like that?
There's
That-
performance standards.
Performance
yeah.
standards, that's what it was, it's performance standards. I think it covers that, and I'm not sure if that satisfies what you were looking for, or is it more of a general, just how the whole,
I think it was just more of a general brush on how they approach home-based businesses, really, is what kind of I liked. Because, I mean, when we talk about some of this, there's other items such as traffic, and I know, like, it talks of, like, use of storage and tractor trailers, semi-trucks, box trucks, equipment trucks, and just going from memory, I think, like the county talked, it just identified no more than a 3/4-ton truck in the yard, things like that, because there may be instances where it, like for a small home-based business, if they have a small work truck, this doesn't allow that to be parked in the driveway somewhat, where, the county, I think, is a little more forgiving maybe, and I think a little more all-encompassing for a community like ours, where it's, we have very suburban neighborhoods and we have very rural neighborhoods, so, that's, and I read it on the weekend and I wrote my notes then, so I can't quite remember much since then, but,
Our neighborhood has had some specific problems with work trucks, and they take advantage of it, even though they may not have been a home-based business. They were having trucks parked in their driveway, and it was very obnoxious, and one person did it, and a second person bought a home and thought, oh, I can do that too, and he got a bigger truck, and we finally ended up enforcing covenants on those people, and I think the village code also prohibits parking those vehicles in residential neighborhoods already. But I agree, if they have a truck as part of the business, it should be garaged, not side.
But I might also, at least to counter that, I don't entirely agree with you. I mean, if that's something you want, then you purchase a home in a community with a very strict HOA that has very strict rules and regulations. If you don't want the rigidity of an HOA, you might look in a different subdivision where there are some rules and regulations that allow a little more freedoms. And to me, the language here, it just seemed like it started going down that HOH path, or HOA path a little bit, where I thought the county language was a little, like I said, I don't know if I want to say a little more forgiving, or it was just a little more broad where it maybe allowed for a little more flexibility. So it's just my opinion.
I guess for that, it'd be hard to compare unless we see it. So I guess I would suggest that, as much as I'd like to get this done, I would suggest we probably take a look.
Yeah, we can.
Could
We
you just
can.
at least pull that, and then
Yeah.
we could compare that side by side next meeting? And then we could
We
make
can.
that decision to say, hey, look, we like this, or we like parts of this, and let's add this or that.
Sure, yeah, sorry.
I have a question though on one. It says home-based businesses shall be conducted only by residents of the subject property. Does that mean they cannot have any employees as part of the business?
They can, but you you can't rent out a house
Right.
and then use it as your business. It has to be your primary residence. It's prohibiting that.
So maybe
I
conducted.
can't
conducted
remember
may
if
not
this
be the
really
right word.
addresses the number of people, is that in here at all?
something about no, it's like that's permitted home business at 4 students at a time. That was one.
Yeah.
That's the only number that I saw that had that. I mean, home-based business shall be conducted by only residents on, yeah, if you had somebody come into your house to work to do your books or something like that, I could see, if a part of your business was saying, but.
You have a part-time secretary
Or
or.
accountant or whatever,
Yeah,
yeah,
there's
yeah.
a lot of situations where you would have, but the point is that you want the resident to own the business and not prohibit them having other people working for them as part of it. I think that's the intent.
Yeah, that is, yeah. It wasn't this thing that
Yeah.
was not intended to, in fact, it doesn't even address other employees or how many, but, so what this is saying is that house where a home-based business is being conducted, it has to be, the business and the residence has to be the same person, the same person conducting.
But, I
And if they hire someone else, that's really not addressed here. So if we wanted to limit that,
But
or add this in, this does not apply to employees.
Yeah. Hang on a second, I think we're looking at, when you say conduct, maybe the word conducted is.
Conducted is probably the
yeah, but
misleading word.
I say it's basically owned and operated.
Right.
Oh, it's owned and operated by the resident,
Yes.
owned and operated.
Yeah.
Is more a way to do.
I mean,
Sure.
you also have that real challenge of how do you enforce it? Again, it sort of
Exactly,
comes up,
yeah.
how do we inspect each person going in and out?
I
But I
know.
mean, if you say up front you want to limit it in whatever form, at least it's on the page.
Yeah.
And then if it becomes an issue for the neighbors, et cetera, they can come point
Right.
to it versus something that's more ambiguous of lots of different, people that could qualify as employees.
Well, and I think four kind of raises that same challenge of how do you enforce it if someone has a home bakery and they're not gonna use a parcel service to ship off some cookies 2 blocks away. I mean, somebody's gonna come to their home and pick it up, so does that apply to the greater?
No, I don't think that's definitely not the intent, is my understanding. No, I think it's more like if you have a business at home and then you have 4 employees coming there every day, 5 days a week.
No, well, but it just says,
Working 9 to 5 or whatever. I think that's
Yeah.
kind of what the gist is.
well, but in that, it says the delivery and sending of any packages shall be done by parcel or letter carrier mail services. It just sounds like you're not allowed to me, it sounds like you're not allowed to serve your product out of your home by that clause.
I don't read it that way, but I understand what you're trying to say. So it just says parcel, letter carrier, mail services. It doesn't restrict to it.
I think it probably also refers to, if you had a business that needed a significant amount of product or raw product to be delivered, you couldn't have like a large, couldn't have a drop shipper drop off pallets of, off of a
And you couldn't be shipping
large
things
truck
out that way.
or that way as well. And I think one thing to keep in mind in your overall review of home-based businesses is that the village, has likely always been and probably will always be a complaint-based or nuisance-based enforcement department. You're not going to have regular patrol. I don't think you'll ever have the resources for that, nor is that something that a lot of villages do. It's certainly of the village's size, so it's something to keep in mind when thinking about restrictions.
And I could see just picking apart some of these things, just trying to get, and then all of a sudden now you're trying to delineate every single option or possibility or, so I
Right.
don't want to go down that road. It's like, well.
Well, I think that was the
yeah.
goal of you, to make it more broad language versus this narrow little, trying to itemize everything, because then you do run into also enforcement issues when if you're omitting or excluding something, then you actually leave yourself open to, interpretation going, well, my business wasn't specifically listed, where if you leave the language broader, you're actually probably more protected, I would think.
It's always difficult to strike a balance. And I agree with you. I was in a community this afternoon, a very, very large community that was concerned with a radioactive home-based business, because the gentleman was testing small amounts of radioactive substances and calibrating instruments. And it's allowed. He has federal license for it, but Village Code doesn't allow for dangerous or noxious substances like this. So you have to, and that's the kind of community that has an enforcement department that can drive up and down the streets. They're never going to catch everything. So as to the county's definitions or restrictions, I actually just pulled it up. It's really just it's listed in the definition section, but it is very broad. So we can't get the TVs to work right now. It doesn't sound
No,
like,
I can't, for some reason I won't turn on.
But I sent it to Jim so we can circulate it.
Yeah, I know.
But
But
I have
the
it.
danger of being too broad is if you have a problem, you don't have something to
Yeah.
enforce to restrict it.
It does have some of the restrictions that Jim had in his too, though, which are pretty common.
Yeah, and I think that was part of my thought is, like you had said, a lot of home-based businesses are probably more of a complaint-driven thing. And, if you have a little bit broader, of what's allowed, because like you said, Terry, if you start to, barber, well, it said, barber and beauty shop, it didn't say, this or something. It's like people are going to really start nitpicking it, where if it's a little broader, you can kind of say, yeah, but the general intent of that is this. And I know legally it's still a battle, but you go back to the complaint-driven anyway, so, I don't know.
Yeah,
the-
but does
the-
our,
The paragraph C and D I added, that was from another ordinance that I did, and I worked in that community. We never had I can't remember any issue, battles over interpreting what was in C and D. And the other more specific stuff actually protected us quite a bit. And we had a lot of trouble with the tractor trailers and trucks, not just for home-based businesses, just being parked and construction equipment. At some point, if someone's operating a business that either has X number of employees or X amount of vehicles or equipment or shipments, they just need to find someplace else. They just need to go to commercial space, And that's, this is intended to allow kind of the white-collar stuff, the professional people working out at home, and kind of the blue-collar stuff, fixing cars and painting cars is generally not allowed. And when things the intensity gets too much and it starts to overwhelm the primary function of that dwelling unit as a residence, then they just need to seek something. So that's why this is kind of specific. It's like when you start to trip one of these, then there might be an issue.
Well, I think
That's
the
why
way
it
this is phrased right now, saying parcel or letter carrier mail services, using vehicles typically employed, that sounds, very restrictive. Amazon trucks aren't allowed?
No,
it's all right. I don't see it
allowed.
Is that
restrictive at all.
parcel then?
Sure,
that-
it's a parcel company.
That's a parcel
Letter carrier
carrier.
mail services?
Yeah, and the Amazon
UPS,
trucks
DHL.
they're pretty big, actually,
Okay. Okay.
I don't see a
Yeah.
problem with it.
You just don't want a semi pulling up or a box truck pulling up on a regular basis, delivering.
On a regular
the
basis.
materials. Well, I mean, okay, you're setting something up, obviously, if you have equipment that's gonna go in your basement for something, you know, a big copying machine, yeah, they would come, but you don't want.
Rolls of steel being dropped off.
Right,
you know,
yeah, if they're doing some
bulk.
manufacturing, and if it just shows up once, I mean, it's probably not gonna generate the complaint, and we are complaint-based. But if there's a delivery truck coming, you know, once or twice a week, then someone's gonna complain about it. And if it's a semi-truck backing in or blocking the street and taking up, then people start to complain about it. Or a large box truck where they gotta have the ramp and they're rolling up and down with, you know, 10 trips with the little truck and dolly, you know, people start to complain about it. And again, that's the. Yeah, and that's, again, they've probably gone beyond the threshold and they need to look for I mean, that's my opinion, and I'm basing this, like, I don't really care, but I'm just basing this on a lot of experience dealing with this in several communities. I mean, the home-based businesses do generate quite a bit of complaints, and there's quite a bit of investigation, and you're not always able to sort things out, and, I mean, normally you just go, hey, you know, we have a complaint, you know, too many delivery trucks, can you rearrange things or do something differently? And most people try and comply. Every once in a while, someone gets pugnacious.
Jerry?
And you might, again, I think it'd be handy if all the members had, at least, if not the zoning code in front of them, so they can see how it goes from page 1 to the last page and the sort of the sequence of things, but especially the list of definitions, because definitions quite often very clearly, you know, just like you were saying, the Kane County definition seemed to be a good one that you liked. It quite often can outline a lot of this stuff before you get into details like this. So is it are these details relate back to that definition or not? You know, that would be another way to look at it, so.
Jim?
That's my suggestion.
Yeah, more of a question. Is there anything in the village code that controls the use of, you know, storage units like, you know, pods or, because, I mean, that could be part of a home-based business where they would be auxiliary storage. I don't know if that's been addressed.
It's prohibited, and it's occurring throughout the village in some level, and it's requiring some enforcement
Is
right now.
there temporary usage or temporary
Yeah,
accessibility?
temporary is defined, I don't know if it's 10 days or 14
Uh-huh.
days, but we have cases where people have had it on
Yeah.
their driveway for a year.
Year, yeah. Okay, thank you.
And it's not meant to facilitate
A business.
a business.
Yeah.
All right, so if I'm looking at this section B on top of the page, so page 7, I'm fine with the language. I know that you could probably parse it and dissect it a million ways, but I mean, is there something that any of you want to change or add or modify or edit?
The only other one I had a little bit of a question about was the kennel verbiage, because some people do take in a couple dogs to watch at their home for, is that, I mean, would you define that as a kennel purpose?
If they're doing that, it's, you know, they aren't advertising that, it's not a business, it's not like a bona fide kennel where you're raising dogs or you're kenneling dogs, right, can, you know, look you up and take it there. You're probably just doing it for a friend, I would assume.
Well, no, there are some
Yeah.
people who do it for a fee,
Yeah.
you know, but it's not, yeah, but that's what I mean. Yeah, kennel, you think of a large commercial kennel, but
Right.
boarding is still technically kenneling, so I didn't know
Yeah,
if we wanted to,
Currently, it wouldn't be allowed.
Yeah.
If somebody complained, we'd have to enforce against that.
yeah.
I
with
mean,
the way it's worded.
Historically,
Disapproved.
historically, 3 dogs is all you're allowed in the county, and I think in our village code too. And I remember even sitting through a speeding ticket trial as a young man, and it was a very humorous case in the Elgin courthouse that dealt with that issue. Somebody had 5 dogs versus 3 in the city of Elgin, so it's been around a long time.
All right, so I guess my question is there any changes or edits that anybody wants on page 7?
I'd only add one thing under C4, talk about repair, maintenance, painting of motor vehicles, then you kind of throw in to include motorcycles or snowmobiles. That doesn't necessarily preclude anybody from doing small engine repairs, repairing a lawnmower, or things like that. So you're,
Right.
and that's, I guess when I like refer to the county, I think that's where it kind of starts to dive into the,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, and I realize if, you know, a friend's fixing a motorcycle for a friend or something like that, or if they're one at a time, nobody's gonna complain, and it goes on until they move on. But, that may be something that if we're gonna go down the rabbit hole of motorcycles and snowmobiles, we may wanna just refer to it as small engine repair, because that
Yeah.
can get out of control too.
Sure, internal combustion engine, small engine repair, okay.
I've been in 2 cities where we had to add that after complaints. That wasn't in the code, and that 2 sentences was a nightmare to add. And it should have been there to begin with, as Chris is saying.
Okay, so I think, rather than get too much deeper into this, I think we've got a good overview of what this is. Then we can look and compare with the county.
Yeah.
One, and then basically, when that packet comes out next week, hopefully, if that works out, then we can just kind of look over that, and then you can come maybe with an idea of what you like or don't like, or for that, all right? So there were a couple more, 6, 7, and 8 was on the top of the next page, which is page 8 of 16, but then that finishes that section, so rather than spend more time on that, we'll just wait till we get the county version and compare, all right? So then moving on, so that's the one thing, that's what, 8.5? Yeah, 8.5, home-based businesses. Moving on to 8.6, outdoor activities, which is page 8 of 16. That is a quote-unquote new, as we have not reviewed it before.
Right, I'll just comment if I may. So this was assembled from a couple places in the ordinance where it was referencing outdoor operations or outdoor activities. And I tried to take a stab at breaking this out in a way that we could, you know, cross things out or add to it. Most ordinances kind of limit outdoor activities, so if you're an auto body shop, you can't repair the car outdoors, it has to be in a bay, things like that, is what we're referring to. There's obviously some outdoor storage that would be allowed at places like Menards or Home Depot. They have plants outside. There's some things that are inherently they need to store things outdoors. But again, you don't want to just grant kind of a blanket for that, because then people start storing all types of things outside. So I tried to do that. There's also the issue of outdoor dining and drinking. I'm not sure how we do that here. I looked, if we have a permit for it, but somehow that should be addressed someplace in the code. We should allow outdoor dining. Maybe we want to have some communities have they have a small fee for use of the public sidewalk, and there's an agreement to use the private sidewalk, or the public sidewalk, that is. That's it. So I tried to take a stab at that. So outdoor operations, and then the sales. I mean, you have the sidewalk displays, these little folding things, plants that go out, you know, clothing goes out sometime. You know, normally that's allowed so long as they bring it back in at the end of the night, which they probably want to anyway, but that's it. So that's what I was trying to do.
Comments on that section? I don't have any personally on that, which is only basically it's about 3/4 of a page long.
The only comment I had was with item B2, you talked about the outdoor dining, and I think it's a good idea to have some type of permitting process, because typically what'll happen if there is no permitting process, next thing you know, there are little fences here, and then it's here, and before you know it, there is no more sidewalk, and there's no public access. So you kind of need to, if you need to regulate that somehow so that public pathway is still allowed, and there's some inspection, and you have some recourse to go, hey, your tables need to move back, type of thing, so.
And I've normally seen that outside of the zoning code. The zoning code allows the outdoor dining on private property, so I think Balmoral, for example, has an outdoor dining area that appears to be on their private property. I don't think it's in public right-of-way there. There's another cafe here in town that has outdoor seating that appears to be in the public right-of-way, so.
Yeah, as long as you have a clause for public safety, so you don't have some child having to step off the curb
Yeah.
to get around you know.
So this is just the zoning that
Into a busy highway.
specifically allows it, but then there's, could be additional regulations for it. I don't know how we do it here, yeah. But,
I do like the idea of it, basically get like a permit, and so at least you're going to the village and saying, hey, this is what we'd like to do, we'd like
Right,
to go 4
and-
feet there.
yeah,
So I
right.
think that should be incorporated in there, be some type of permitting
right.
process.
That was,
Okay.
in a larger town, that was a frequent
Yeah.
enforcement action, because like Chris said, they gradually take over, and we had we demanded a drawing that they had to adhere to, and we say, hey, this is not in conformance with your application and the license, the permit that was approved based on your application, so, yeah.
COVID, it got like anything
And-
goes, and then it's tough to take it back.
Yeah.
Right, and then too, with the permit, you can also have a defined deadline or timeline of how long that'll be there, otherwise some of these things just
They stay out all
linger and you
winter
can
long.
never,
Yeah,
you have no
right.
recourse to get rid of them
Yeah.
or deal with them, so.
Well, okay, that leads into, on item 4, on-site display and/or storage of products at establishment with a primary use of. I assume the 5 is a editing error.
Yeah, that is, as
Okay,
I was
so
building up.
Those businesses, it's allowed.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta have trucks
Right.
outside, yeah.
Right. But in the end, you don't need a permit or anything to do that, so.
Correct, that's not in public right-of-way. Number 2 talks about public right-of-way or property. So this,
Yeah,
that
so
would be
public property.
C4 would be
Right.
like on your property for displaying a vehicle on your
Right.
property or things like that, where B2 really is associated with the public right-of-way, which is, the city land or
Right.
the government land, how do you want to,
Non-private property.
yeah, non-private property.
Okay, all right. Any other comments on section 8.6 outdoor activities? If not, we'll move on to 8.7 renewable energy structures and uses. All right. First one, EV, that was already covered. Under A. B, solar panels was not. So that is new to review, as well as, yeah, we'll just stick with that, and wind turbines is new as well. So the solar panels and wind turbines will be to review. I did not have any comments
Yeah,
on that.
very little change here. I'm trying to think if there was really anything, maybe some minor wordsmithing on the provisions that are found in the 2023 text.
Yeah, I did-
Drawings, the nice drawings included too, so.
yeah, I
good
don't have any
illustrations.
comments.
Under general requirements, it says solar panels must be placed so that concentrated solar radiation or glare is not directed onto nearby properties or roadways. Is that something that really needs an engineering analysis to prove that when the objects or the arrays are placed, that it's not going to, affect anyone? Because after it's done, it's too late. And it can be very annoying.
Yeah,
So,
I thought about
do we
just
have-
removing that. It seems like it's not required. And then I thought, I can imagine one neighbor mad at his other neighbor
Yes.
purposely angling a solar panel. to
Well,
bother-
not even
to
intentionally,
bother his
but just placing it
neighbor.
there and causing a nuisance. And we've got other
Yeah.
places in the village code where that's defined as
Yeah,
a nuisance. And I guess my point is that it really needs an engineering analysis when the array is permitted, that it's not going to happen. And that's very easily done with the CAD tools that are available today, so something I think needs to be, or would be helpful to identify that analysis needs to be done before permitting is, started.
So good neighbors will be good neighbors.
Right. Good engineers make good neighbors.
All right, so we can add perhaps something like, language saying that, no, it just says that, what was this, want to cite the section again, please, Jim?
1B,
Under,
B1B.
under solar panels,
Yeah.
B1B, which is page 9 of 16.
Yeah.
Solar panels must be placed so that concentrated solar radiation or glare is not directed onto nearby properties or roadways.
And maybe something like demonstrated by an engineering analysis.
Yeah, at the time of permitting, at the
Yes.
time of the permitting, I like that.
That's why this seems like it's more of a building permit requirement than,
But that's one of those things that
Zoning,
where, unless it's called out, it's, nobody will think about it until it's too late.
Well, and I think though, if there is a glare, the neighbor's gonna call the village and they're gonna go, I can't see, or that my siding's melting off my house because he put up his solar panels, and then the village is gonna come out and go, hey, yeah, you gotta adjust that, because it says you can't cause a glare onto your neighbor's property. I mean, for the most part, I would think that it's somewhat obvious. I mean, and if there's a glare or not, you know, I mean, if you can stand there and look at it, and great, there's no glare, but if you need eclipse glasses to look at it, there's a glare, you know? So I don't know if we have to go to the effect of engineering study, just because, you know, I mean, if it's your neighbor putting it up and it's shining it in your face, most people, although I know that's not the case today, you should go to your neighbor and go, hey, you put that up and it's really annoying, can you fix it? And then, you know,
You're making the distinction, Chris and James, there's a distinction between the zoning code and then the building code, which gets into what we're trying to make good neighbors with stuff, so I think. I understand both your professional reasons why not getting that detailed. It's covered there, I think, in the permit. Under the building permit would be where you get into the engineering, generally, right?
yeah.
I mean, as long as it's, if it doesn't have to be here, but if it's in the building code, then, yeah, then that, yeah, we
check,
cover it.
yeah.
It doesn't seem like it'd be
Yeah,
too hard.
but
Too
probably
hard.
isn't currently, but. I mean,
Right, right,
And that's an easier one to amend.
yeah, okay.
One that surprised me, sort of as a side note, is that the impact of solar panels, you think it's all positive and all that, which I understand, but on the flip side, apparently some of the large solar farms are being put out there. They're resculpting these farm fields, and they're probably losing that long-term use of that soil, which you wouldn't think would be the case. You know, just stick the thing out there and that's it. But, so that's a whole other thing that, to a lot of this.
All right, any other comments on solar panels? Hearing none, we'll just move on then to, so I guess, just a takeaway for Jim's purpose. and
Yeah, do you want
so,
something added in there here or not? I can add it.
Personally, I think something maybe more in permitting building code would be more appropriate. I kind of like do say it's just solar radiation or glare is not the, it basically says must be placed. So I say, well, it's right here, it must be placed. And so if it's not placed, then you have to move it. So, but I could see a note in there in maybe the building code, which is, that's a whole nother, it's not our issue, but that might be helpful in the permitting process or something.
Yeah.
But here, I think I would leave it alone. All right. If nothing else, wind turbines. That's a new section.
Yeah.
And let's see, I don't have any comments on wind turbines. Anybody else have any comments to add?
And there was one, Jim, last time you made some comment about the height of wind turbines as opposed to the radio towers?
When we had an application back in 2008 or something, there's one wind turbine that was being requested, and one of the requirements was that if it fell down, it
Oh,
wouldn't
yeah, yeah,
fall
yeah.
on somebody else's property.
Right.
And I noticed we got that verbiage in the sections on satellite antennas, but we don't have that on, there's nothing in ham radios, and
Yeah.
it just seems inconsistent, and it's difficult. A friend of my wife's has a house for sale, and there's a ham radio tower next door, and it's probably, 40 feet tall, and it's, 20 feet from her house. So, I don't know what the solution is, but it's just, it's something that, we're inconsistent on.
Uh-huh.
I would agree if you've got a tower on your property, that you would want to make sure that it doesn't fall onto someone else's.
Yeah.
because that you can control. Mother Nature and enough trees, another one.
I don't know, I've got a history of that too, though, that some way ham radio operators and their towers got some kind of exemption about not needing to fall within their own property because they're in urban areas where the lots aren't that big, and we tried to restrict them in a couple communities like that, and they came back and said, no, they've got something to do with the Communication Act federally that you can't restrict them on their height and their location. So they've got a different issue that we'd have to look at, and if that's still in play, and that's my memory
I'll look at it,
professionally.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I guess if we're gonna start, I mean, if we're worried about things falling, why don't we start restricting the height of trees? Because a tree in your yard may fall on your
know.
neighbor's
Well,
property.
yeah.
So, I mean, I think a ham radio tower, I mean, yes, some of them are large and they're tall, but for the most part, the equipment on there is very lightweight because the tower has to support it. I mean, a wind turbine, depending, I mean, some of those wind turbines can have huge gearboxes, but I think this is more of a residential type of wind turbine. We're not talking the ones that are, and maybe this would apply to those where you go down towards U of I and you hit the line, and I don't
Yeah,
know what
yeah.
that parallel line is, but I mean, it's red blinking lights for miles, east and west, so, but in all those, I don't know, I mean, this might need to address that if somebody were to want to put like more of a commercial grade wind turbine in the village too, so.
Yeah, this one just, it's got a max height of 15 feet on the wind turbines, so that's what I'm seeing so far from the,
Yeah.
so would be yeah, so that wouldn't be really an issue then.
Well, 75 feet, I think, is freestanding.
You talking turbines?
Yes.
It's 15 feet mounted on a structure, and then I'm looking.
I thought that was the ham radio operator, was like 75 feet.
Maybe
Yeah,
that was
section,
it.
yeah, 88A2, antennas, building, the maximum height of 75 feet. That's
Okay.
under ham radio equipment.
My mistake.
Yeah, it's all right, no, it's all good. A lot of numbers, a lot of stuff.
So there really is no height limit on a freestanding tower, wind turbine tower,
Probably fall under the blanket for accessory structures.
as long
It
as
says
it doesn't fall
maximum-
across
Yeah.
his neighbor's yard.
Maximum height allowed in the district is what it says,
Yeah.
under C2A.
Mhm.
Any ground-mounted wind turbine is the maximum height allowed in the district.
Which is normally 40 feet.
Special use.
Okay, for 40.
And that has a special use, all right? So no changes? Okay, I see no changes there. All right. 8.8, communications equipment, that was done before? That's done?
I did have one quick
Yeah,
question
sure,
on
but
that.
yeah,
Is there any reason why the amateur radio operator tower has to be located 10 feet from the building?
It was in here.
And the reason I ask is because if you have to locate it 10 feet from the building, you have to run your cables now underground or overground. Excuse me, so I don't know what the point of that is. I mean, the towers are grounded, if it gets struck by lightning, everything else, so I would be, excuse me, I'd be in favor of getting rid of the 10-foot restriction.
It does say towers are limited to a maximum, in a lot line, I think that you should keep, I think that, I have no problem with keeping that in. Located a minimum of 10 feet from any lot line and any principal building. We just, maybe just get rid of any principal
principal
building.
building.
Yeah,
Oh, does that
that's
sound-
what I was
that sound-
suggesting,
All right,
yeah.
okay.
I just
All right.
didn't know if there's a reason why that would be there, because
Yeah. No, my grandparents had a tower on their house, but it was right next to it.
right.
All right. Anything else, but nice, good point. Anything else on the communication equipment, which is under 8A? All right, so then if not, then we'll move on to 8B, 88B, on page 12 of 16, satellite dish antennas, large and small. And I have no comments that I have. Anybody else? Okay?
Yeah, this was straight out of the current.
Yeah, all right, then fine, then very good. Then we'll continue on to 8, 9, other accessory structures and uses. This was, some are done, some are not. So A, book exchange box was done already. Carports was done already. Not that you can't add anything else, but I'm
Right,
just
and
saying.
I added Chris's, he wasn't here,
Yep.
but he did write, and I think his correction is
Yeah,
in here. I
over
believe.
asphalt or
Paved
paved
surface, yeah.
surface, yes, thank you, that was a good comment. Detached garage, C, we've already done that, but I guess since we just discussed that, the area above the vehicle parking spaces in a detached shall not contain a kitchen, so that would be, so, yeah, that would be subject to change, since we've now gone down the route of allowing that, so there we
Yeah,
go.
okay, yeah,
So there's a place for a correction,
okay.
all right?
Would you want to indicate shall not contain a kitchen unless part of an ADU?
I think that'd be key.
Or is there any concern at all? I mean, I think, was this already pre-existing in the code, Jim? This language?
This is straight from the existing code.
So it may have been there to prevent from
Turning
essentially
into
an
an
unregulated ADU.
Yeah, that's what I think it was.
So I guess you still have the same question. Do you want to have something that is not a regulated ADU in essence?
So I don't care, keep it, strike it. I mean, to me, it kind of doesn't make sense for allowing ADUs, they're going to have a kitchen. I mean,
If that's what, yeah, that could, we decide to go down the ADU, the all-in path, so.
County, I think, typically used the evidence of a kitchen in an accessory building as, oh, that's a residential. I personally had experienced that in my first few weeks of marriage when we were going to move into the stable and adapt it, and the architect included a kitchen. The county said no. 3 or 4 years later, we realized the stable was on another parcel. We could have built a mega mansion if we wanted there.
Yeah.
So, but anyhow.
So I guess then removing that, since we're
Yeah,
if we're gonna allow,
I
if
think
we're gonna
Jerry's
allow.
right. It's normally provisions like that. Sometimes you can't have a separate kitchen in
Right.
the basement or attic because the fear is they're going to convert it into a separate unit, you know.
There's
And
nothing
we've
for-
had people apply for variances for a
Yeah.
second kitchen, and
Yeah.
quite often we've allowed it.
If somebody's at, I guess, how would
In
the
the
village define kitchen? Is that sink, stove,
Mic-
fridge? Is it
microwave?
sink? Is it, yeah, I mean, what, because there's
Well, I
nothing
know.
in the definition section of kitchen, so
Yeah,
I don't know.
I know. There's probably one in the IBC or IRC,
Yeah,
but
it's-
yeah.
To the building permit, it's usually plumbing,
Yeah.
electrical.
Yeah,
But
but,
as long as it's in the definitions, I
yeah.
guess.
I mean, my preference is just, take this out, since we're allowing, right now, we have the ADUs to be
so
above a garage.
You
so-
still leave in item 2, which we changed item 1, I guess detached garage, a permit on the rear, and I would do
Yeah,
that in.
yeah, exactly.
to
I think
just
they should
strike
be- yeah.
item 1 and just make
Yeah,
item 2,
mhm.
item 1. Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. All right, on to D, mailbox, which is page 14 of 16. That is a new section, and I have no comments on that one.
It's new and we haven't reviewed it, if this was in the
Correct,
current-
new is that we have not reviewed it before, yes. When I say new, it's like, it's both been part of the section, but we have not reviewed it, since it's been reorganized, so.
I was just gonna recommend in item D1, the postmaster has, I think, minimum distances behind the curb that mailboxes have to be or they won't deliver it. So I don't know if we wanna say, where it says there's no minimum distance from the lot line where it must be located. I don't know if we want it, I mean,
Postmaster.
Does
I
it
get if you put
follow-
on the house, there's no minimum distance, but you need to comply with the postmaster.
Yeah,
Need to
I'll add a phrase.
Comply
postmaster.
with,
Well, this is really confusing because it has nothing to do with street delivery. This is an on-property mailbox or a cluster of mailboxes or, an HOA or something, isn't it?
Probably, yeah, that's what I think it is.
Because
yeah.
it specifically, says does not control those located on the public right-of-way. So, do we have any instances of mail delivery to cluster boxes in the village? like I said, this was very confusing until I reread it and saw that it exempted public right-of-way delivery.
And typically, the right-of-way, most locations goes from sidewalk to sidewalk too, so even a cluster mailbox, most times is going to be in the right-of-way. So-
Yeah, true. Sometimes when I read the ordinance, I wonder what the background is and why certain things were done. Maybe there was some issue, with mailboxes and it got inserted. Any clue, Jerry? Was there any issue with mailboxes previously, do you know?
Yeah, the only issue I ever heard about mailboxes in general is people building mailboxes using steel I-beams, which you guarantee would cut your car in half.
Yeah.
And that's item 3,
Yeah.
D3. Yeah.
But that's only on private property. This applies only to private property.
So that's the following, the first sentence. The following
Yeah.
standards apply to mailboxes located on private property. So I guess,
I think the postal regulations have very similar construction requirements too. You can't have something that's not breakable. I mean, so
Yeah.
that would be covered.
I tend to doubt that's true, because we've got mailboxes all over our subdivision that are in brick.
Oh, yeah, they're not, I mean, if they're in the public right away, the postmaster would say they're not allowed. But postmaster's not gonna require that it be taken down.
those are probably a private property.
A lot of HOAs don't allow them either,
So what's the intent of this paragraph?
That was my question. I mean, this is,
What are we trying to accomplish? What are we
I
trying to
think it's
accomplish?
covering your bases if you ever have a subdivision that's built and the postmaster says, I want cluster box instead of delivery. You know, they do, this is something that could be needed in the future. You don't have it now, but it covers a type of development that would
Yeah.
require this. I think it's just kind of a catch-all, and a good zoning code has a section on this. I don't think, just because it doesn't apply today, it might not be something that's built in the future.
So what ordinance controls the mailboxes in the public right-of-way? Is that the postal code?
Generally.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Okay. Because it says this is all about private property, then we got to adhere to the postal code. So if it's not private property, it's got to adhere to the postal code.
I almost want to think that, in the past, that's approach that had a little bit to say about it too. I sort of recall that was like back in the days, that was sort of enforcement. The commission come around and say to the property owner, you got a problem here, but obviously that hasn't been done a lot.
Yeah, the highway or public works in most cities would say they want them as far off the roadway as the postal service will allow, because they don't want snowplows knocking them down every time they plow snow in northern Illinois. But then you got the postal guy doesn't want it beyond where he can reach it out of his vehicle, so that,
On the box,
yeah,
saying I can't reach it.
right. So the two battle each other, but
Yeah, I've always been surprised that they didn't almost require full walls for deliveries like that, especially in communities like this that aren't real traditional units.
So do you want to keep this, amend this, edit this? What? I mean, I guess, just keep it for now, and that's, but I don't know if there's an
Yeah, I
edit that
mean,
needs to be
it's
done?
not really
Does it need
hurting
to be
anything.
Revisited?
it might be needed in the future.
Yeah.
I guess, maybe you just make it all encompassing mailboxes, and you don't distinguish between private property or public property. You just say it has to, comply with all US Postal Code regulations. You can't use a heavy metal post, concrete post, blah, blah, blah. Number 3, you can include number 2, and then you can talk about number 1, where it's not allowed in the site triangle. And that way, it's all encompassing, whether it's on
Yeah.
private property or public property, and then that way, if a future development comes in, oh, where can we put the mailboxes? Oh, we got, you know, information
So
on
how
that.
about
It
just
can't
strike,
be,
strike the first sentence, the following of standards apply to mailboxes located in, just strike that. Just
that in the last sentence.
And the
This ordinance
last-
does not control those located on
Okay,
public
okay, the
right of way.
first, yeah, and just say all, and so just leave, all mailboxes must adhere to applicable United States postal regulations.
Yeah.
Additionally,
Right.
Yeah,
1, 2, 3.
I mean, you could even have just one paragraph if you want, or
Yeah,
however,
you
but,
can do that.
but then that way at least it's covered, and then it covers the village and, you know, for allowing bricks. So, no, we can't allow you to put a brick mailbox in, you know, and things like that.
all right, any other comments on mailboxes? So strike those two sentences. Then we'll move to E, Echo Mechanical Equipment, that's new. And just one comment by staff says, move mounted equipment provisions to the section on commercial design standards. So I imagine most mechanical equipment would not be on a residential home on the roof.
Right, I mean,
Yeah. Okay. I don't have any comments on mechanical equipment. If not, anybody else? We'll move on to F, which is also new, refuse dumpsters. And I have no comments on F, refuse dumpsters, if anybody else does. If not, then, Jim?
Again, this is for permanent or regular use. For construction or temporary activities, it doesn't apply.
You're saying what doesn't, if it's temporary, it doesn't apply, or if it's for permanent, it doesn't apply, is it?
If it's temporary, you know, prohibited in front or side yard, I mean, you know, if somebody's doing a roof tear off, they're gonna have a dumpster in the driveway.
Yeah, but they get a permit for the roof.
For the roof, right.
And then the
Right.
dumpster, temporary dumpster goes with it, so it really does.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, I do have a question.
yeah, go for it.
Because it's related to the agricultural use of dumpsters. Sometimes people will temporarily have a dumpster dropped off at their facility to clean out their horse barn. Yeah, so how would that factor into this clause?
Yeah, this is, really, the intent here is for commercial properties. They have a dumpster, like a restaurant, and how it's supposed to be enclosed, and the height.
It's a permanent.
Yeah, it's for a permanent one. Doesn't say that, but that's the intent.
Well, I mean, is that the key then? Maybe we should have that say permanently versus temporary use?
Well, it says commercial. Right, Jim?
Not
Does
right
it say that in
now.
here? No,
Yeah,
it doesn't
I
now.
don't
so
see
I think
that. It
that's
just
really-
says refuse dumpsters.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The purpose of the section, it says refuse, for the purpose of this section include recycling containers of similar size. So that sounds to me, yeah.
Maybe we reference it to the commercial, because that's usually.
Yeah, or it just goes to the commercial design standards, really.
So we wouldn't get into somebody's.
Well,
It's
I,
basically the roll-offs, they pick them up every week, so
Yeah.
you have them, and I'm not talking about the big long ones necessarily, but they're still good size. You know, 5, 6 bodies worth at least in Chicago.
But the horse farm, they're out during the summer usually, and not so much, we went and examined a couple complaints, Jim.
Yeah.
We're not trying to regulate those.
Uh-huh.
I guess if we move it to the commercial section, we do, if there's an apartment complex or a duplex, there might be dumpster corrals located in that development too, so I don't know, whether we, you know, how we want to do
Yeah.
that, we should do that, or, you know, we put language that says, it, you know, applies to commercial and residential
Yeah.
developments or something, I don't know. Or maybe you can add something, like a number 5 that says temporary use dumpsters, you know. Yeah, or something, I don't know, although then you start going
Is
down that
that-
rabbit hole, what's temporary?
You could probably put some language saying, you know, permanent refuse dumpsters, and the only thing about temporary dumpsters is that some would require a permit. I mean, if you're
Yeah.
gutting a house, you'd have to get a dumpster, I mean, village does have a dumpster permit, I imagine,
I think we
temporary.
do,
dumpster.
yeah.
Right, so we would not want to exempt them entirely.
So do you want to remove this whole section and put it somewhere else, or you just want to amend it to be more in a permanent, to be more clear in the sense of it's a permanent, not temporary?
Can leave it here. If it's going to apply to the residential, the multifamily residential, then I can just amend it here.
Say multifamily and commercial.
Yeah.
All right, so then rewrite to
I'll just say these provisions shall apply to
commercial.
commercial, multifamily, residential land uses.
Okay.
And not to in farm, blah, 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 et
Okay,
cetera,
all right.
temporary.
All right, all right, so you got an idea where you want to go with that. Okay. Moving on to performance standards, 810. I think with the question of the staff comment there is this section was grouped in with other sections dealing, is included for review, but it belongs someplace else in the ordinance. I tried to think about where that might go.
Yeah.
And the only thing I kind of came up with, looking at the current list of articles that we have, is either the very last section of Article 8 as a tail-end thing, or Article 2. That was my opinion. So I don't know what anybody else has any other thoughts. But, you know, it'd be almost like a catch-all at the end of this article, Article 8.
Yeah.
Or I thought maybe Article 2, which is more kind of definitions and things like that. So I don't know if that was applicable, but it seemed hard to put it any other place.
Mm-hmm.
In my
I mean, some ordinances will have, zoning ordinances will have a separate chapter or article just on all these, like the illumination, which we've taken out. It will group all those kind of standards together in one separate article. Kind of the nuisance stuff and, like I said, illumination, and what do we have here?
Really, this is just about all kind of the odors and noises and dust and air pollution, vibration, those are the kind of a lot of the, really, it's kind of a nuisance ordinance.
Yeah.
It really is what it is. It's a nuisance ordinance. It kind of just outlines that. So that's what I thought too, might be the best place for it, but it's kind of like the black sheep looking for a home.
All right, do you want to review it now? Is there any issues with this?
No,
or- mean,
I actually
I'll
do
find
not
out.
have any comments that I
Right.
looked at it. I don't have, yes, it's only a couple pages, or even page and a half. So I don't have anybody else have any comments?
Looking over it in general, it's just so very vague. I don't know how some of this could even be enforceable.
Yeah.
Someone says, well, I hear noise coming from my neighbor's property, and somebody else says, what noise? You know,
Uh-huh.
you know,
Well, it just, it says basically sound that's greater than allowed by federal, state, and local regulations as amended from time to time. So
What regulations? I mean, cite some code
Uh-huh.
if you're gonna do that.
well,
Yeah.
well, it comes to me that, are you gonna, I don't wanna say pigeonhole, but are you gonna get all these specific things, lined up, this ordinance, or do you say, hey, you just can't be doing it? But I understand where you're coming
Yeah.
from.
Yeah, I don't know where to go with this. I mean, these are things that, create, bad feelings and,
Yeah.
tense situations, but unless you have a method of measuring, quantifying, and, putting, an ordinance on that specifically says, so many dB of noise at the property line, or so many, lumens of glare from a street lamp or a parking lot, or, particulate matter, dust, so many microns, so many parts per million. This means absolutely nothing other than saying, hey, be a good neighbor and, don't.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not gonna be enforceable.
Well, I think stormwater management has to comply with all local, state, and federal management requirements.
That's a good one. That
Yeah,
at least
you
has
know.
some, references to it, but most of these others,
Well, the noise basically is allowed by federal, state, and local regulations, so I can't cite you what those are, but, yeah, I mean, it is definitely subjective. You get like glare and heat. I mean, that would be flickering and intense sources of light must be controlled or shielded not to cause a nuisance across, so there is some. So I guess, was this in the original?
Yeah.
This was in the
it
original
was.
proposal? proposal from, yeah.
Yeah, and the village code under nuisance section has a pretty thorough definition of different types of noise, construction noise, vehicular noise, harsh, prolonged, or unusual noise. And then it has a set of factors to determine what would make a noise be considered a nuisance. And that's pretty typical of the village code to refer to that. So that's what it would mean for local
But then
regulations.
why is this section here?
Because it has to do with, because this is
It's its own
It-
section.
It's its own section for environmental performance, so it's related to just a specific parcel of property or the noise emanating from a property, whereas, I could be driving down the street with, Blues Brothers speakers on the top of my car causing
Yeah.
a significant amount of noise. That wouldn't be something in the zoning code, that would be something in the village code. Right,
Vehicle
so-
code.
Or
something.
village
Yeah.
code, really,
Still
yeah,
a
it would
nuisance.
be a nuisance, but it wouldn't be relating to a specific piece of property.
But
This
these,
is,
but then these statements here, these standards should need to reference the village code where it is called out, doesn't it?
it can be a little bit more specific if you'd like, but referring back to federal, state, and local regulations, so local regulations would be the village code,
Yeah,
right?
That's covered.
okay.
If we're trying to, I was gonna say, a lot of these things seem to be more of a nuisance code type thing, but if we're looking for a place, maybe we run it back up to 8.1 under general requirements. And then we can just kind of say, hey, here's some of
Yeah,
the
we could do that.
environmental standards that need to be followed. And if there's items that relate to more of the nuisance code, we refer to that. So that way we have one location that talks about allowable decibels of X rather than, well, here it says I can have my radio at 70 decibels, but in the city code it says I can have it at 80. And then you change one number and,
Right, and because it's an environmental performance, because we're talking about properties, maybe to tie it in a little bit more, you could say no activity or use must be conducted in a manner that generates a level of sound emanating from a particular property, and then go on from there.
Yeah.
So you're relating it back to the property itself. That's really what this is about.
Yeah.
It's the use, the activity that's occurring on a particular property, not on the public way, not, in a transient manner. It's coming from a particular property.
There has been some issue with cryptocurrency mining, where you have so much electricity or so much data and stuff, that actually creates noise in the neighborhood from an individual home.
Yeah, could. Mhm.
All right. I guess then Jim, well, Mr. Brown, Jim Brown.
Yeah.
So,
You can call me Jim.
yeah, I know, but I just want to make sure I don't get confused, which Jim? I
Oh,
got Jim on my
I
right,
see,
I got
okay,
Jim
yeah.
on my right over here, so.
All right, yeah.
I got two Jims looking at me when I say
Okay.
Jim, so I was just trying to be clear. So maybe move to 8.1, was a suggestion?
You could, I mean,
We'll
I'd
see what-
just,
we'll
yeah,
See what
yeah.
that looks like, but then I did like the idea of maybe some verbiage, language that tied it to, it said ties to a specific property. I think that clarifies that this, I mean, in the big picture, yes. but
Yeah.
If it ties it to a specific property, I think that's a good point that clarifies what this is all about. Or like, say, noise or these standards emanating from a specific property. And then, I don't know about, I kind of like the idea what Chris was saying, like, if you put in 50 decibels here, but it's 70 decibels over in another someplace else, by keeping this more general the way it is, we might be better, well-served this way, and letting the nuisance ordinance be more specific.
Yeah.
That's what I
Right,
kind
and
of like.
and another reason for having these standards here are that, and I can't think of a use off the top of my head, but if a particular use, let's say, might be permitted in a use district, or in a zoning district, and, or it could be a special use, but the volume of that use might create more noise, more glare and heat, vibration, other things that are in here. It gives an ability of staff to review that application at the zoning level, and not at the complaint level after it's already been established. So that's really the reason for having it here.
Okay, if I have no further comments, then Jim, do you have good direction on what we
Yeah,
should do
I do.
there? Okay. I think we're getting close, wrapping up here. I'm just gonna, it's 8:22, and if we need be, is it okay if we just go over like by 15 minutes? I don't think we need to, but I'd rather just keep this, and just finish up what we have, all right? So if I'm hearing no objections, we'll.
Almost
we'll
done
go-
with Article 8.
Yes, I know. So if no objections, we can go to 8:45. All right, so that would finish up with page 15 and 16 and section 810. Then, now we're coming back to the tables, permitted 8.1 and 8.2. First one on page, well, I guess it's right after page 1616, so it says permitted accessory structures and obstructions in yards. The only thing that, my comment that I would add is immediately under the header of permitted accessory structures is perhaps just one line that defines, I know you've defined it somewhere else, but P is permitted, dash, not permitted.
Yeah.
Just put that right under there, so that,
Yeah.
so when people look at it, they go, what's a P, what's a dash? So then they know exactly what that means, okay?
The blanks is not
Or
allowed.
the dash, well, I guess there is fences has nothing in it.
Yeah,
so-
it actually
Oh,
explains that. See, this is going to be located by section 8.2, and it explains that in section 8.2A.
Okay.
But I can add it to the
Yeah.
chart as
I
well.
put
but
it like right
it
under
is-
the header,
yeah.
because most people look at a table, they're looking
Yeah,
for a legend.
yeah,
what-
but
what
it
makes
is in the text, but I can add
Yeah.
it there too.
Because you have arbor and pergola, just, they're empty, so that's not a clear indication of.
Yeah, I left that arbor, I was gonna cross that out, because it's really the same as a trellis. I forgot to do it, so.
All right,
When I read this list, one thing that I thought was that there are several items here that are left over as being allowed encroachments, because it was back when this was
Yeah.
related to encroachments, so things like an arbor, a balcony, a bay window, the
Right.
Orioles, those things, and, you know, the trellis, just, I don't even think they should be allowed, or not be allowed, those should be in here, because this is really referring to, you know, the side yard setbacks and what's allowed in those areas. I mean, and like the balcony, that's part of a building. So, you know, when you're looking at a setback, the balcony usually is, you know, the wall of your building will be the setback. And then an encroachment, which is probably why the balcony was there, that would be allowed to encroach into that, where I think with the way this table is kind of where we've changed it, those don't really apply
The balcony
now.
probably wouldn't.
You know.
And, like I said, the arbor or trellis, I mean, that would just fall under this, was it 10 feet from any lot line? You know, in the yard. I was gonna cross, arbor and trellis have essentially the same definition. I was gonna cross one of them out and I forgot to do it. So that's something that belongs in a rear yard or maybe a side yard.
Why not in the front yard?
Right, people put those in the front.
You could if you want it, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't care.
You know, or an
That's what you
arbor,
want, go
or,
ahead. I mean,
I guess my whole point of that is those are more building-related items. They're not necessarily, you know, like if you're building a house or some of those things.
so canopy, I'm sorry, so canopy,
accessory structures.
yeah,
which are-
yeah, right, the balcony
it's-
is, right, that's
Right,
more of
it's
the
not really an
encroachment
accessory
issue.
structure, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, balcony, bay windows, same thing.
Yeah, so I guess the point is that if this is permitted accessory structures,
Then
are
it should be,
those,
yeah,
are they
right.
really structures? Are they really
Right, the
accessory?
bay window I would cross out, canopy I would take out.
So maybe we review that and just, maybe, Jim, review that and just under the guise of saying, hey, is this really under the definition of an accessory structure?
Right.
And then-
Oriole,
and then- And then remove those.
yeah, okay,
Okay? So you can, you can review that?
yeah.
And then, and edit that as well? Okay. All right, and then we'll get that back next meeting. Anything else? I'll move on to 8.2?
Yeah.
All right. All right, so 8.2, we had this discussion last time, and they were looking for some more definitions, and I think what we were trying to align, since the map and the zoning had like 2 acres, but we had different acreage uses and so forth. So anyway, we have 2 different options here that you provided us. one thing that I thought of, it would make one suggestion is, the first table, 8, the top one, so it's only got 3 lines in it, would be just to align the numbers, like 2 acres or greater than 2 or up to 5, is just to align those with the residential R1, R2 and below. So, for example, instead of saying 2 acres or less, we'd say 2.5 acres or less. And then be greater than 2.5, but less than, instead of 5, less than 4, because that's R1.
Okay.
And then the last line would be greater than 4 acres. So you'd have, those all would then match up the zoning that we have. So we'd have R1, R2, and less than R.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Then for the square footage wise, it's kind of arbitrary, the 900 and the 1,800. And then we know the 2,880 is definitely arbitrary. But what I just did, I looked at it, is that if you do 2.5 acres, or if you do 2 acres, their number came up, that 900 square feet comes up to 1%. And then if you do 4 acres, it comes out to 1%, the 1,800. So my suggestion is, you do 900 square feet, 1,800, and anything greater than 4, you say 1%. 1% of the, 1% of the property. That way, if you've got a 6-acre property or a 16-acre property, it makes more sense that you would have that same, and everybody's treated the same. Everybody gets basically 1%, or you just change it all to 1%. That's another way to look at it. But it might be easier just to say the majority. I think that also they wanted the numbers of how many buildings we had, and you added that in there at the very end. Overwhelming majority is like 2,800 were less than 2 acres.
Yeah.
And then it basically was like, 96 over 5 and like
Yeah.
400 or something. So it really was talking about the majority of the people below like 2 acres.
Yeah.
So, overall majority. Anyway, so that's my thought process is if we want to align this with our current zoning, it might make it easier and more logical. That's my suggestion.
And I'm assuming this took away the maximum 2 building, it's now just square footage, whether you have 2 buildings or 5 buildings? I mean, is that what we kind of moved to?
I don't remember that's,
I think it still says 1 accessory building.
I'm getting, I know it's one accessory dwelling unit,
but-
accessory
I thought it had
building.
I thought it was a max of 2 accessory.
I believe that you're correct, yes.
Yeah, but there's a lot of exceptions to
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think trellises were considered,
Right.
the fences weren't.
Well, that's why I thought we were moving to more of this maximum square footage and allow the homeowner to make a decision as to how they use that square footage.
I have to look at it again to find out what the actual, but I believe it was two accessory unit and accessory structures. But there obviously were exceptions, like you say, a trellis doesn't count, that
Right,
doesn't,
fence
certain things
didn't
don't count. But I think we're sticking with the 900, or you just take 1%. You can do 2,700, which would be 900, 1,800, 2,700, if you want to do square feet, but, or is that what you're talking about?
1% is fine, but my point is, going back again to this limitation, if you have 16 acres and you're telling them they can only have 2 accessory buildings versus just giving them 1% of however they want to work, if they need 3 or 4 accessory buildings based on their use of their land, as long as it only comes to 1%, they should have the ability to do that.
Yeah, I tend to agree that if you look at, the RE1, RE2, RE3, where you would be putting the buildings, where you could put accessory buildings, you start out with 900 square feet at RE3, then RE2, I don't know where you go with that, but with RE1 and above, 1% under roof might be, a way of defining. That way, if they want 3 buildings, but it's all how much of their total property they could put under roof, if it's
Not to exceed 1%.
not to exceed 1%. Yeah.
And then
Of
within,
available space, too.
because
Yeah.
they can't
Septic,
encroach.
and what is the story on septics? Is that definitely required now? You have to have 2 septic field areas. If the first one fails, you then have to have another one that's set aside, some of them?
I think it's county code,
Okay,
health department.
yeah. So if that's county code, then right away you're talking about X amount of square footage that basically, now if it's a movable structure, I suppose, if it's a little shed, by at Sears or something like that, it might not be as much of an issue, but if it's a foundation, then that might be more of an issue. So people need to be aware you're allowed the structures and the percentage, provided you have that amount of buildable space on your lot at that point in time. And any other things, I mean, if there's a drainage area or a swale that,
All right, I'm just looking real quick, I went back to the beginning of A2 accessory structures, I'm just trying to find if there is some restriction there on the number as it's currently written. So I want pets page 2 of 16 and overall 12 of 63 in your packet. So near the top. And let's see. Detached accessories are limited to the total square footage as indicated in table 8.2. All principal accessory structures are on a lot are still subject to the maximum building coverage and maximum impervious surface regulations. So it's very general there, all principal and accessory structures. It doesn't seem.
Yeah, I think that was taken out, and,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't believe I see anything that restricts the number of it now, number of buildings or structures.
So we
Yeah,
must, I mean, it
so-
was in there, so we must have. struck
Yeah,
it.
I think we, yeah.
I
okay.
thought we were looking more at like a max lot coverage.
yeah, that's what I thought, and that's
Which,
okay.
which, that first chart having the first 8.2, my thoughts were, it doesn't go to that with the max lot coverage, and whether it's 1% or 1.5% or 0.5%, we can talk about that ad nauseum and at a later date. But I think in general, having a max lot coverage is probably a little more fair, for lack of a better word, to everybody, because if you have a 2.5 acre parcel or a 5 acre parcel, you can only have 1,800 square feet. Where if you have a 5 acre parcel, that allows for, a little more use of your property, and it's not as limiting maybe. It gives you a little bit more of some, for whatever you want to build. So that was my thought. I prefer to do like a max lot coverage. And then the other thing I at least wanted to just touch base with is, this talks about max total square footage of all accessory structures on the lot. Now, if you look at the title for 8.1, it says permitted accessory structures and obstructions in the yards. It lists like a patio as an accessory structure. So now all of a sudden, if somebody's putting a 10 by 20 patio on their back of their house, now they have 200 square feet of accessory structure, so then that means they can only have a 700 square foot type, so you start to get into the weeds of that, where I think maybe you're better off, in my opinion, looking at like a max lot coverage. So if you want to put up 10 chicken coops, and you can do it, and it's zoned or whatever, but just for discussion's sake, and you want to have them, a 3 by 3 chicken coop, and so you got, your 9 square feet, and your 9 square feet, and your max lot coverage is X. As long as you don't exceed that, you're fine. And then you can use, the max lot coverage from the patio, that can be it. Then the driveway, that can be it. So when people want to add, extension onto their driveway, and you start to look at the max lot coverage, it also then plays into the stormwater permit aspect as well, which, when you get your additional impervious area, it all kind of ties together, in my opinion, so.
Yeah, we have it in here, anyway. Yeah, we have max building coverage, that's of all the buildings on the lot, and then there's a max impervious surface coverage, that's in a different chapter. It goes with each district, so.
In this ordinance?
Yeah, in this ordinance. The way I've normally seen this done is not, they have, those two are pretty standard. And then there's sometimes a limit on the total number of accessory structures, with some exceptions for fences and things. And then there are limits on sizes of specific structures. So if you want to build a patio, knock yourself out, as long as you don't bump over that max impervious surface coverage. But something like a garage will have a max, there'll be a max on a garage. Trellis, there's no max, have the trellis run, from one end of your property to, go 4 acres in another direction, that's fine. But normally you have limits on sheds, garages. That's about it, really. Let me take a look. Please. But that's the way I've seen it done, and my thing, and I wasn't gonna say this because this is the way it was handed, but I don't know if we need like an aggregate for all of the accessory structures, Then you get into how big do you wanna allow someone to have a pole barn or whatever? I mean, I don't know. So maybe a percentage of the lot is good. I don't know, but we are covered with impervious surface, and we're covered in a different chapter with a maximum, how is it defined here? I just brought it up. Maximum building coverage. So that would include the primary structure as well, not the accessory structure. And to give you just some indication, so the RE1, it's 20% for the maximum building coverage.
I think we've introduced a lot of confusion between accessory structures and accessory buildings. I mean, a fence shouldn't become additive to, a structure, a building usage.
It's a structure. It's considered a structure.
I know it is,
Yeah.
but if you're trying to say we'll go up to 900 square feet, no. How much area does a fence take? Does that mean that you can only put up a 300-foot garage, because a 300 square foot accessory building because you've got perimeter fencing?
Oh, I wouldn't even, someone that wouldn't even.
But
enter
that's
into
what this
that
is saying.
calculation. No, I don't think so.
You call accessory structures and,
Table 8.1.
yeah. But 8.1 doesn't differentiate a building versus a true accessory, a trellis. They're totally different.
Well, you're
So-
referring to the top of table 8.2 where it says maximum total square footage
Right,
of all accessory.
I'm sort of looking at,
No.
I'm just, trying to understand why a fence is an accessory structure versus a garage, which is an accessory building, and differentiating between buildings and, maybe structure isn't the right word, but, to me, it's very confusing that you've got things here,
Well, I
that
think
are
he-
structures.
I know, part of that was, Jim had agreed that he was gonna remove a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff that's not
Okay.
necessarily. So, yeah, it's in the table, so one of
Okay.
Jim B's jobs is he's gonna take
Yeah.
a look at that whole table and say, hey, this is not a structure, or this, like you
Yeah.
say, like the trellis or whatever. So he's gonna remove those things. I
Okay.
understand your point, but I think Jim's got that tasking where he's gonna remove that. So he's gonna condense that table.
And what Terry, you're trying to do is just let the homeowner, the building, his decision or her decision is in their hands to be flexible
Right.
and just go to the percentage. And I don't think that'd cause us any conflict, would it? Because you still got the other,
Yeah, because you still have your
Stormwater.
other above
Stormwater.
guidelines with stormwater and impervious and lot lines. So those are gonna be your primary guidance, but then at the end of the day, as long as they're conforming within those guidance,
Mm-hmm.
they should be able to take their 1% of square footage and divide it how they need for their property.
Right.
Okay.
I've seen this, done different ways, like I said, limiting specific structures, limiting total structures. We started out with a limit on the total number of accessory structures with a lot of exceptions to that, and with an aggregate for all of the accessory structures. That's how our ordinance, that's
Terry
the
just gave us
2023.
his point right away.
Right, so
So I like the 1% basically when it comes
You
down
want the
to it.
1%.
Versus having this chunk of 2.5 to less, all of that area only gets 900. Whether you're a quarter acre, which we don't have, I know, but, or 2.5, technically you're saying all of those people are lumped into 900. Where if you go your percentage route, then it's true to the property.
I mean, that's fine.
Yeah,
Don't really
just
care.
go
But then,
1%.
and then we do not impose any restrictions on the number of accessory structures.
Correct.
It's just,
That's correct.
we have the other impervious surface coverage, total building footprint coverage, which would include certain accessory structures. And then we have an aggregate for accessory structures.
All right?
And then what do we want those, can you read the divisions again? I'm sorry. So it's just 1% is what we want.
1%.
That's what
We're
we're
gonna
going to go
simplify it,
with.
1%.
I'm sorry, yeah. So we're just going to go with 1%,
Yeah, yeah,
which is kind of what it was already.
yeah.
All
yeah.
right, that's
It
fine.
just, it just makes it consistent then. All right?
So that's pretty permissive, really, but that's fine.
And, oh, yeah, that can be changed, like I said,
Yeah,
it'd be
that's,
0.8%.
Oh, that's good.
1.2%,
That's good.
but we can always change it.
that's good.
All right? I think that covers it for the night, all right? So, unless anybody has last-minute comment, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I guess, Mr. Brown and Mr. Brown. Mr.
Jim.
Kopeck.
It's
No,
Jim.
Jim?
Mr. Kopeck with the motion to adjourn. Do I have a second, please?
Second.
I have Mr. Teet. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried, motion adjourned. Thank you very
All
much
right.
for your participation.
That's okay. That's okay. I don't care. All right. We still haven't got to that non-conforming chapter.